Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the massive construction site spread before him. The Kepler Station mining facility was the largest joint venture between Earth and the Galactic Trade Union, a testament to humanity's recent acceptance into the broader cosmic community. Towering extractors reached deep into the asteroid's core, while transport shuttles buzzed overhead like metallic insects, carrying precious minerals to waiting freighters. The human foreman had been on the job for 8 months now, managing a crew of over 300 workers from 12 different species. It wasn't easy coordinating beings who communicated through everything from verbal language to pheromone releases. But Marcus had earned his reputation through results, not diplomacy. When quotas needed to be met, somehow his teams always delivered. Chen. The sharp voice cut through the industrial noise like a plasma cutter. Marcus turned to see Zarathek striding toward him, her serpentine lower body undulating gracefully across the metal grating. The Sulhari supervisor stood nearly 8 feet tall when fully extended, her scaled torso gleaming emerald green under the artificial lighting. Like all her species, she possessed 4 arms and a predator's instincts that made most other aliens nervous in her presence. "What is it, Zara?" Marcus didn't look up from his datapad, continuing to review the daily output reports. The numbers were good, better than projected. But he knew she hadn't come over to congratulate him. "Your human workers missed another safety protocol," she hissed, her forked tongue flicking out to taste his emotional state. 3 violations in the past week alone. Perhaps your species lacks the intellectual capacity for proper industrial procedures. Marcus finally raised his eyes to meet her golden gaze. Zarathek had been testing him since his first day, probing for weaknesses with the patience of an apex predator. Most supervisors from other species treated him with professional courtesy. But the Sulhari seemed to view humans as an amusing curiosity at best. "My crew has the highest safety record on the station," Marcus replied calmly. Those violations were minor infractions that were corrected immediately. No injuries, no equipment damage. By Sulhari standards, such sloppiness would result in immediate termination. Zarathek moved closer, using her height advantage to loom over him. "Your people are reckless children, playing with tools meant for proper civilizations." Other workers in the vicinity began to take notice. A cluster of Velkari engineers paused their conversation, their crystalline bodies refracting the overhead lights as they observed the confrontation. Several human crew members also slowed their pace, sensing tension in the air. "Is that so?" Marcus set down his datapad and crossed his arms. "Funny thing about those proper civilizations. None of them volunteered to work the deep extraction levels. Too dangerous for their refined sensibilities, I suppose." Zarathek's pupils narrowed to vertical slits. The Sulhari took great pride in their reputation as warriors and hunters. Questioning their courage was tantamount to a direct insult. "Humans know nothing of true danger," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Your soft world produced soft beings. You've never faced real predators, real threats to survival." Marcus chuckled, which only seemed to infuriate her further. "Soft, are we? That's rich. Coming from someone whose species needed energy shields and powered armor just to hunt their dinner. At least we evolved beyond primitive barbarism." Zarathek's 4 hands clenched into fists. "Unlike some species that still settle disputes with crude physical violence." "Physical violence?" Marcus laughed outright now. "Lady, humans invented warfare as an art form. We've been perfecting it for thousands of years, while your people were still figuring out which end of a spear to hold." The exchange was drawing more attention now. Work in the immediate area had come to a virtual standstill as beings from multiple species gathered to witness what appeared to be an escalating confrontation between supervisors. Such public disputes were rare and potentially costly in terms of productivity and morale. "Enough of this," Zarathek gestured with one hand, and Marcus heard a familiar rumbling growl from behind him. "Vex, come here." Marcus turned to see the source of the sound. And despite 8 months of working alongside various alien species, he still felt a momentary chill. Vex was a Draconis Supremus, a creature from Zarathek's homeworld that served as both her personal companion and a living symbol of Sulhari dominance. Standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder and stretching nearly 12 feet from nose to tail, the beast resembled humanity's ancient legends of dragons brought to terrifying life. The creature's hide was a deep purple-black that seemed to absorb light, broken by veins of bioluminescent silver that pulsed with its heartbeat. Its head was massive, housing jaws that could bite through reinforced steel, while its 4 legs ended in claws designed for gripping prey. Most intimidating of all were its eyes. Intelligent orbs of molten gold that seemed to evaluate every potential threat with predatory calculation. Vex had been engineered by the Salhari over millennia of selective breeding, transforming what had once been their world's apex predator into the ultimate companion animal. Each specimen was worth more than most starships, and owning one was a mark of tremendous status among the serpentine species. "Beautiful creature," Marcus said, and he meant it. Despite the inherent danger, he could appreciate the elegant lethality of millions of years of evolution, refined by intelligent design. "Vex weighs nearly 2 tons, Zarathek said with obvious pride. "His bone density is 3 times that of most comparable species, and his muscle fibers are carbon nanotube enhanced. He could tear apart a battle mech with his bare claws." "I don't doubt it," Marcus nodded respectfully toward the creature, which had positioned itself between him and its master. Hell of a thing to bring to a construction site, though. The Galactic Trade Union regulations permit personal companions provided they pose no threat to operations. Zarathek's tone carried a hint of smugness. "Of course, some species find his presence intimidating." Marcus walked slowly toward Vex, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from several onlookers. The Draconis fixed its golden gaze on the approaching human, muscles tensing beneath its armored hide. Its nostrils flared as it analyzed his scent, searching for signs of aggression or fear. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus spoke in the same tone he might use with a nervous horse. "Nobody's looking for trouble here. I wouldn't recommend getting too close," Zarathek warned, though there was anticipation in her voice. "Vex can be quite protective when he senses disrespect toward me." "Disrespect?" Marcus stopped just outside the creature's reach and looked back at her. "I thought we were just having a friendly discussion about work safety protocols. Your crude attempts at humor do not disguise your species' inherent weakness," she replied. "Humans are small, fragile beings who compensate for their limitations with technology and bluster." The crowd around them had grown larger now. Marcus could see representatives from at least 8 different species watching the exchange with varying degrees of interest and concern. Some were undoubtedly taking bets on how the confrontation would resolve itself. "Fragile?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting choice of words." "It is simply biological fact." Zarathek moved closer to her companion, one hand resting on Vex's neck. "The average human possesses perhaps 1/5 the physical strength of a Salhari. Your bone density is laughably low. Your reflexes adequate at best. Even your lifespans are embarrassingly brief." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if seriously considering her words. "You know what, Zara? You might be right about some of that. Humans aren't the biggest or the strongest or the fastest species in the galaxy." Finally, some honesty from, "But here's the thing about humans," Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly across the construction site. "We don't just accept our limitations. We figure out ways around them." He began walking toward Vex again, causing the creature to shift its weight and emit a low warning growl. Several aliens in the crowd stepped back instinctively. But Marcus maintained his steady approach. "Take this magnificent creature of yours," he said conversationally. 2 tons of engineered muscle and bone, razor-sharp claws, jaws that can bite through steel. Absolutely perfect for hunting on your home world, I'm sure." Zarathek's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What point are you attempting to make, human?" "Just wondering." Marcus stopped directly in front of Vex, so close he could feel the heat radiating from the creature's massive body. "Has he ever been off-world before? I mean really off-world, not just transported in a climate-controlled ship." "Vex has traveled extensively throughout Salhari space," she replied carefully. "But always in controlled environments, right? Always in places designed to accommodate his specific needs?" Marcus reached out slowly, palm open, allowing the creature to investigate his scent. "See? That's the difference between humans and most other species. We adapt. Adapt? Zarathek's voice carried a note of confusion. This asteroid we're mining, Marcus continued, his hand now resting gently on Vex's snout. The gravity here is only about 60% of Earth standard. Most species need powered assistance to function normally in reduced gravity. But humans? We just adjust our movement patterns and keep working. He began scratching behind one of Vex's ear plates, causing the massive creature to emit what could only be described as a purr. The atmospheric pressure is wrong for most species too. Too thin, wrong gas mixture. But humans have been dealing with hostile environments since we first started walking upright. Your point remains unclear, Zarathek said, though her tone suggested she was beginning to understand where this was leading. My point, Marcus said, moving to Vex's side and running his hand along the creature's flank, is that adaptation isn't just about changing your body. Sometimes, it's about changing your approach to a problem. Before anyone could react, Marcus bent down and slipped his arms under Vex's torso. The crowd collectively held its breath as the human foreman straightened up, lifting all 2 tons of engineered predator clean off the deck plating. Vex let out a startled yelp but made no move to attack. The creature seemed more confused than threatened, its legs paddling gently in the air as Marcus held it steady. For a moment that felt like an eternity, human and dragon-like alien regarded each other eye to eye. Impossible, someone whispered from the crowd. How is he doing that? Asked another voice. Zarathek's jaw hung open in shock, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. The Salhari had seen demonstrations of human technology, witnessed their crude but effective tools and weapons, but this was pure physical capability, raw biological strength that shouldn't have been possible. The secret, Marcus said calmly, as if holding a 2-ton predator was no more challenging than carrying a bag of groceries, is understanding leverage and load distribution. Humans have been lifting heavy objects since before we had machines to do it for us. He gently set Vex back down on the deck, giving the creature a final pat on the head before stepping back. The Draconis immediately moved to its master's side, pressing against her in an obvious request for reassurance. But more than that, Marcus continued, brushing dust from his hands. We've been dealing with dangerous predators since our species began. Earth was never a safe world. Zara, we evolved alongside creatures that could kill us without breaking a sweat. Tigers, bears, sharks, venomous snakes. Our planet was packed with things that wanted to eat us. The construction site had gone completely silent now. Even the background hum of machinery seemed muted as hundreds of beings processed what they had just witnessed. So we learned to be clever. Marcus picked up his datapad and returned to his work reports as if nothing unusual had happened. We learned to use tools, to cooperate, to think our way around problems that pure physical strength couldn't solve. And occasionally, when necessary, we learned to punch above our weight. Zarathek remained frozen in place, one hand still resting on her companion's neck. The casual ease with which the human had handled Vex challenged everything she thought she knew about his species' capabilities. The safety protocols you're so concerned about? Marcus added without looking up. They're not there because humans are careless. They're there because we've learned from experience what happens when you get complacent around dangerous machinery. We've made those mistakes already, back when the consequences meant death instead of just a reprimand. He finally raised his eyes to meet hers again. Your move, Supervisor. The silence stretched for several more seconds before work slowly began to resume around them. Conversations started in hushed tones as beings dispersed back to their duties. But Marcus could feel the weight of hundreds of gazes still upon him. Zarathek straightened herself to her full height, dignity and pride warring with newfound uncertainty in her expression. This changes nothing. Foreman Chen. One display of crude strength does not elevate your species above. You're absolutely right. Marcus interrupted with a smile. One display doesn't prove anything. Good thing that wasn't the point. He walked past her toward the extraction levels, pausing only to give Vex one final scratch behind the ear plates. See you around, big guy. Stay out of trouble. As Marcus disappeared into the depths of the mining complex, Zarathek found herself staring after him with an expression of profound confusion. Around her, The normal rhythm of the construction site gradually reasserted itself, but she could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The casual dismissal her species had shown toward humans was beginning to crack, replaced by something far more complex. Vex nudged her arm gently, seeking attention, but for the first time in her life, Zarathek barely noticed her prized companion. Her mind was racing, trying to reconcile what she had just witnessed with everything she thought she knew about human limitations. In the depths of the asteroid, Marcus Chen continued his daily rounds, checking on work crews and reviewing progress reports. But word of what had happened was already spreading through the station's communication networks, carried by beings who had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the galactic community. By shift's end, the story would reach every corner of the facility. By week's end, it would spread to neighboring systems. And by month's end, it would become the foundation for a legend that would reshape how the galaxy viewed the newest addition to the Galactic Trade Union. But for now, Marcus simply focused on his job, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories were won not through conflict, but through the simple act of showing others who you really were. 3 days after Marcus lifted Vex, the story had spread throughout Kepler Station like wildfire, through dry vegetation. Every species had their own version of the tale, embellished with cultural details that made the human Foreman sound like everything from a mythical hero to a dangerous anomaly. The Velkari spoke of it in crystalline harmonics that made the event sound like a religious experience. The gas form ethereals transmitted the memory through chemical signatures that conveyed not just facts but emotions. Even the notoriously factual mechanoids had updated their databases with new probability matrices regarding human physical capabilities. Captain Thorne Blackridge, commander of Kepler Station, found himself dealing with an unprecedented situation. In his 40 years of managing multi-species operations, he had never seen a single incident generate so much interspecies dialogue. His communication array was flooded with queries from trade union officials, xenobiologists, and what appeared to be representatives from several major galactic governments. Sir, his aide, a efficient young woman named Lieutenant Sarah Kim, approached his desk with another stack of priority messages. Admiral Voss from the Earth Defense Corps wants a full report on the incident. The Salhari High Council has requested detailed biometric data on all human personnel. And there's something called the Galactic Strength Index Committee, asking for permission to conduct tests. Blackridge rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of bureaucracy settling around him like a heavy blanket. What does Chen himself say about all this? That's the interesting part, sir. He seems completely unaware that he's caused such a stir. His daily reports are normal. Productivity in his sectors is actually up since the incident, and he hasn't mentioned anything unusual. Of course he hasn't, Blackridge muttered. He had served alongside humans for most of his career, first in the Earth Defense Corps, and later in joint operations. While most species viewed the lifting incident as either impossible or miraculous, he recognized it for what it truly was, a fairly typical example of human stubbornness applied to a physical problem. A chime from his communication console interrupted his thoughts. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Ambassador Kaiseth of the hegemony. The reptilian diplomat's scales were a deep crimson that indicated either anger or intense interest, and his vertical pupils were dilated in a way that suggested predatory focus. Captain Blackridge. The ambassador's voice carried the formal tones reserved for official business. The Hegemony Council requires clarification regarding recent events at your facility. Ambassador. Blackridge straightened in his chair. The Hegemony represented the oldest and most powerful alliance of species in the galaxy, and their interest in station affairs was rarely a positive development. How may I assist you? We have received reports of unusual behavior from your human personnel. Specifically, claims that one of your supervisors demonstrated physical capabilities far exceeding established parameters for your species. Blackridge chose his words carefully. There was an incident involving Foreman Chen and a Salhari companion animal. No safety violations were recorded, no equipment was damaged, and no personnel were injured. The details of the incident are less important than its implications. Kaiseth leaned forward, his massive form dominating the display. For the past 18 months, the Hegemony has been evaluating humanity's integration into galactic society. Your species was granted trade union membership based on technological achievements and resource contributions, not physical capabilities. I'm not sure I understand your concern, Ambassador. Our concern, the reptilian's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble, is that your species may have deliberately understated your capabilities during the integration process. Deception in such matters is considered a grave violation of galactic law. Blackridge felt his jaw tighten. With respect, Ambassador, humanity has never claimed to be physically weak. We simply haven't felt the need to boast about our capabilities. Nonetheless, the Council requires a demonstration. We are dispatching an evaluation team to your facility. They will conduct comprehensive tests of human, physical, and mental capabilities to determine if your species poses a potential threat to galactic stability. The connection terminated before Blackridge could respond, leaving him staring at an empty display. After a moment, he activated his internal communication system. Lieutenant Kim, get me a secure line to Earth Defense Command. And find Foreman Chen. Tell him he's about to become the most important human in the galaxy. Meanwhile, in the depths of Sector 7, Marcus was dealing with a more immediate problem. A massive seam of rare metals had been discovered in the asteroid's core, but accessing it would require cutting through a formation of incredibly dense rock that had already destroyed 2 industrial plasma cutters. The mineral composition is unlike anything we've encountered, explained Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief geologist. Her Hispanic features were marked with excitement and frustration in equal measure. It's almost like the rock is reinforced with some kind of natural metallic matrix. Our standard equipment just can't penetrate it. Marcus studied the geological survey data on his tablet, noting the unusual density readings and crystalline structures. Around them, his mixed-species crew waited for direction. The discovery of the rare metal seam had raised the value of the entire mining operation by several orders of magnitude, but only if they could figure out how to extract it. What about thermal lance cutting? Asked Jorik, a Stoneclaw engineer whose species had natural expertise with geological formations. His rock-like hide made him invaluable for working in unstable tunnel conditions. Tried it. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. The thermal conductivity is too high. The heat just disperses through the entire formation, instead of creating a focused cutting point. Sonic disruption? Suggested Meltar, a harmonics specialist whose people used sound waves for everything from communication to manufacturing. The acoustic properties are all wrong. The rock seems to absorb and redirect sonic energy instead of fracturing under it. Marcus continued studying the data while his team discussed increasingly exotic solutions. Orbital bombardment was mentioned, and quickly dismissed due to the risk to the station. Chemical dissolution would take decades. Even controlled antimatter charges would likely destroy the valuable metals they were trying to reach. What about good old-fashioned drilling? Marcus finally asked. The group fell silent. Dr. Vasquez looked at him as if he had suggested using stone knives and bear skins. Foreman, she said carefully, we're talking about rock that's harder than military-grade armor plating. Our most advanced boring equipment would take years to cut through a formation this dense. I'm not talking about machine drilling, Marcus said, setting down his tablet and walking toward the rock face. I'm talking about manual drilling. Hand tools, human technique, old-school craftsmanship. Jorik's stony features managed to convey incredulity. Manual drilling? Through materials that have defeated industrial equipment? Sometimes, the old ways work best. Marcus ran his hand over the rock surface, feeling the texture and grain structure. Humans have been breaking rock for thousands of years. We did it before we had machines, and we got pretty good at it. But the hardness readings, Dr. Vasquez began, are based on machine applications, Marcus interrupted. Machines apply force in predictable patterns. Humans can adapt their technique based on the material's response. He walked back to the equipment depot and began gathering tools that most of his crew probably thought belonged in a museum. Hand drills, steel chisels, sledgehammers designed for human grip and swing patterns. The alien members of his team watched with growing confusion as he assembled what appeared to be a collection of primitive artifacts. Foreman Chen, Meltar's harmonic voice, carried notes of concern. Surely you don't intend to attempt this personally. Actually, That's exactly what I intend. Marcus hefted a particularly massive sledgehammer, testing its weight and balance. But not alone. Kim, Rodriguez, Jackson. You three still remember your mining academy training? Three human crew members stepped forward with expressions that mixed excitement and apprehension. Kim Nakamura had grown up in the asteroid belt and learned rock breaking from her grandfather. Rodriguez came from Earth's mining colonies where automated equipment was often unreliable. Jackson had military engineering experience that included explosive demolition and tunnel clearing. Sir, Kim said carefully, that rock defeated industrial plasma cutters. Are you sure hand tools will work? I'm not sure of anything, Marcus admitted, but I know machines work by applying force according to programmed parameters. Humans work by feeling the material and adapting our approach accordingly. Sometimes adaptation beats raw power. What followed was unlike anything most of the alien crew members had ever witnessed. The four humans began working the rock face with a coordination that seemed almost choreographed. Marcus would strike with the sledgehammer, reading the vibrations and sound to locate potential fracture points. Kim would follow with precise chisel work, exploiting the tiny cracks his strikes had created. Rodriguez used drilling techniques passed down through generations of miners, while Jackson applied shaped charges with surgical precision. Hour after hour, they continued their assault on the stone barrier. What had seemed impossible gradually became merely difficult, and what had seemed difficult slowly transformed into steady progress. The alien observers found themselves mesmerized by the rhythm and efficiency of human labor, applied with generational skill. Incredible, Dr. Vasquez whispered to Jorik. Look at their technique. They're not just hitting the rock randomly. Each strike is calculated. Each tool placement is deliberate. It's like they're communicating with the stone itself, Jorik replied in amazement. His own species were natural miners, but they relied on specialized biology and genetic knowledge. Watching humans overcome the same challenges through learned technique and adaptation was profoundly impressive. The breakthrough came after 6 hours of continuous work. A fissure that had been growing slowly under their patient assault suddenly opened into a substantial crack. Within minutes, the crack became a gap, and the gap became an opening large enough to access the valuable metal seam beyond. Unbelievable, breathed Dr. Vasquez as she took mineral samples from the newly exposed vein. The concentration is even higher than we predicted. This seam alone will fund station operations for the next 5 years. Marcus set down his sledgehammer and wiped sweat from his forehead, looking satisfied but not surprised by their success. Sometimes, you just need the right approach for the job. News of the successful breakthrough spread as quickly as the lifting incident had. But this time, the story carried different implications. Where the first event could be dismissed as a fluke or trick, the systematic destruction of an impossible geological obstacle suggested something far more significant about human capabilities. By the time Captain Blackridge's summons reached him, Marcus found himself at the center of a swirling storm of galactic attention that he neither wanted nor understood. The message was simple and direct. Report to the command center immediately for a priority communication from Earth Defense Command. The walk through the station corridors felt different now. Beings from various species stepped aside as he passed, some with respect, others with wariness, and a few with what appeared to be fear. Conversation stopped when he approached and resumed in hushed tones after he had passed. In the command center, Captain Blackridge was waiting with an expression of grim determination. Marcus, we need to talk, and I'm afraid what I have to tell you is going to change everything. Lieutenant Kim activated a holographic display showing the official seal of the Earth Defense Corps. A moment later, Admiral Voss appeared in the projection, his weathered features marked by concern and something that might have been pride. Foreman Chen, the Admiral began without preamble, what you've done in the past week has attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic government. The Hegemony Council is sending an evaluation team to determine whether humanity poses a threat to galactic stability. Marcus felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. Sir, I was just doing my job. I know that, son. But apparently, your job has redefined how the galaxy sees our entire species. The tests they're planning will determine humanity's future in galactic society. If we fail, We could face trade sanctions, territorial restrictions, or worse. What kind of tests? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Physical and mental capability assessments, combat simulations, problem-solving exercises. They want to know what humans are really capable of, and they're going to use you as their test subject. Captain Blackridge stepped forward. Marcus, I know this isn't what you signed up for when you took this job. If you want to decline, Earth will support your decision. We can claim the incidents were exaggerated or find some other explanation. Marcus looked around the command center, seeing the faces of beings who had become his colleagues and friends over the past 8 months. They were all watching him with expressions that ranged from hope to anxiety, waiting for his decision on a matter that would affect billions of lives across multiple worlds. When does the evaluation team arrive? He asked finally. Admiral Voss checked his chronometer. 72 hours. Then I guess I better get ready, Marcus said with a slight smile. After all, somebody needs to show them what humans are really made of. As he left the command center to return to his duties, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the irony of his situation. He had spent his entire career trying to prove himself worthy of respect and responsibility. Now, he was being asked to represent his entire species in front of the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility should have been crushing. But somehow, Marcus found it energizing instead. After all, he was human. Overcoming impossible odds was what his people did best. Behind him, the command center erupted into a flurry of activity as Captain Blackridge and his staff began preparations for the most important evaluation in human history. But Marcus was already thinking ahead, planning how to demonstrate not just what one human could do, but what humanity itself represented in a galaxy that was about to discover they had been seriously underestimated. The hegemony evaluation ship arrived exactly 72 hours later, emerging from hyperspace with the kind of precise timing that spoke of military discipline and bureaucratic efficiency. The vessel itself was an imposing sight, a kilometer-long dreadnought whose dark hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Sensor arrays and weapon emplacements dotted its surface like metallic growths, while escort fighters maintained perfect formation around the massive ship. Marcus watched the arrival from the station's observation deck, surrounded by his crew and dozens of other personnel who had gathered to witness what might be the most important moment in human galactic history. The sheer size of the evaluation ship drove home the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just a routine inspection, but a formal assessment that could determine humanity's future among the stars. Impressive, commented Dr. Vasquez, who had positioned herself next to Marcus at the reinforced viewing windows. I count at least 40 different weapon systems on the visible surface alone. They're not here to fight, Marcus replied, though he couldn't keep a note of uncertainty from his voice. But they want to make sure we understand the stakes. Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled over the station's communication system. All personnel. The hegemony evaluation team will be arriving via shuttle in 30 minutes. Department heads and designated test subjects report to Docking Bay 3 for orientation briefing. Marcus straightened his uniform and checked his gear one final time. He had spent the past 3 days in intensive preparation, reviewing human physical and psychological profiles, studying galactic law and diplomatic protocol, and practicing with equipment that might be used in the evaluation process. But despite all the preparation, he knew that much of what was coming would be improvised responses to unpredictable challenges. Remember, Captain Blackridge's voice came through his personal communicator. You're not just representing yourself, or even this station. Every human in the galaxy is counting on your performance. No pressure, Marcus muttered, earning a nervous laugh from nearby crew members. The shuttle that emerged from the evaluation ship was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. Where most galactic vessels were designed for efficiency or aesthetics, this craft seemed built solely to project authority. Its angular hull was covered in sensor equipment and what appeared to be recording devices, suggesting that every moment of the evaluation would be documented and analyzed. When the shuttle's passengers disembarked in Docking Bay 3, Marcus understood why the hegemony's message had been taken so seriously by Earth's government. The evaluation team consisted of representatives from 7 major galactic powers, each more imposing than the last. Leading the group was Warmaster Krexthar, a draconian whose species had dominated galactic military affairs for over a millennium. Standing nearly 9 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating, he moved with the fluid grace of a born predator. His 4 arms each ended in claws that could tear through reinforced steel, while his reptilian eyes held the cold intelligence of a creature that had never known fear. Beside him walked Supreme Evaluator Zindal, a crystalline being whose translucent body pulsed with internal light patterns that indicated rapid data processing. The Synthesians were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical capabilities and absolute objectivity in matters of scientific evaluation. The third figure was perhaps the most unsettling. A creature that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. The Phase Walker called itself Observer Marthek, and its ability to perceive multiple realities simultaneously made it invaluable for detecting deception or hidden capabilities. Behind these 3 came additional representatives from the Mechanoid Collective, the Ethereal Consciousness, the Hive Mind Unity, and what appeared to be a temporal engineer from the mysterious Kronos Foundation. Marcus had never seen so many major powers represented in one place, and their combined presence drove home the unprecedented nature of this evaluation. Foreman Marcus Chen. Warmaster Krexthar's voice rumbled like distant thunder. You are the human designated for comprehensive evaluation. I am. Marcus stepped forward, maintaining eye contact, despite every instinct telling him to show deference to the obviously superior predator. Ready to proceed when you are, Warmaster. The Draconian's eyes narrowed slightly, apparently surprised by the lack of submissive behavior. Most species would have lowered their gaze or assumed defensive postures in the presence of such obvious physical dominance. Confidence, noted Supreme Evaluator Zindal, her crystalline form flickering with rapid light patterns. Preliminary assessment suggests either exceptional self-control or dangerous overestimation of capability. We shall determine which. Observer Marthek's voice seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human Marcus Chen, you will undergo 7 evaluation categories over the next 48 hours. Physical capability, mental acuity, emotional stability, adaptive problem solving, leadership capacity, ethical framework, and species integration potential. Marcus nodded. Understood. Where do we start? Physical assessment commences immediately. Krexthar gestured toward a large cargo container that had been unloaded from their shuttle. Standard galactic strength, endurance, and coordination protocols. What followed was unlike any physical examination Marcus had ever experienced. The hegemony's testing equipment seemed designed to push beings to their absolute limits and beyond. Gravity simulators that could replicate the crushing forces of gas giant surfaces. Resistance training that required lifting weights calibrated for species with enhanced muscular systems. Endurance challenges that would exhaust most beings within minutes. Marcus approached each test methodically, drawing on techniques learned from a lifetime of physical labor and military training. But more importantly, he adapted his approach based on the specific requirements of each challenge, using leverage and technique to overcome raw physical disadvantages. Impossible, whispered the mechanoid representative, as Marcus completed a lifting sequence that should have required hydraulic assistance. Biological tissue cannot generate sufficient force for such performance. Incorrect, corrected Supreme Evaluator Zindal, her internal lights pulsing rapidly as she processed the data. Human biomechanics demonstrate previously unknown efficiency ratios. Muscle fiber recruitment patterns exceed theoretical maximums for species of comparable size. But the real surprise came during the coordination tests. Where most species relied on specialized appendages or enhanced sensory systems, Marcus demonstrated the kind of full-body integration that came from evolving in an environment where survival required constant adaptation to changing conditions. Observe the kinetic chain integration, noted the temporal engineer, whose perception allowed him to see the subtle interactions between muscle groups and neural pathways. Each movement incorporates feedback from multiple systems simultaneously. This is not specialized evolution, but generalized adaptation. The mental acuity tests proved equally revealing. Rather than the hyper-focused intelligence displayed by most galactic species, Marcus demonstrated what the evaluators termed synthetic cognition. The ability to combine seemingly unrelated information into novel solutions. Present Scenario 7, commanded Zindal as holographic displays showed a complex tactical situation involving multiple variables and competing objectives. Optimal solution requires simultaneous consideration of resource allocation, temporal constraints, and interspecies diplomatic protocols. Marcus studied the scenario for several minutes, his approach completely different from what the evaluators expected. Rather than attempting to calculate optimal outcomes through pure logic, he seemed to be intuiting patterns and relationships that weren't immediately obvious. "There's no optimal solution," he said finally. "The scenario is designed to force a choice between competing values. But humans don't usually solve problems that way." "Explain," demanded Krexthar. "Instead of choosing between options, we usually try to change the parameters of the problem itself." Marcus manipulated the holographic controls, demonstrating an approach that none of the other test subjects had attempted. "If we modify the resource distribution pattern and adjust the timeline to account for diplomatic protocol delays, we can achieve all three objectives with acceptable compromises." The evaluators exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. What Marcus had demonstrated wasn't superior intelligence in any conventional sense, but rather a fundamentally different approach to problem-solving that seemed uniquely human. The emotional stability tests proved most challenging, not because Marcus lacked control, but because human emotional responses were apparently unlike anything in the galactic database. Where most species showed predictable patterns of stress response and recovery, Marcus demonstrated what observer Marthek termed emotional integration, the ability to use emotional states as sources of information and motivation, rather than obstacles to overcome. "Fascinating," the phase walker observed as monitoring equipment tracked Marcus's responses to various psychological stressors. "This being processes fear as tactical information, rather than paralysis trigger. Anger becomes focused determination rather than irrational aggression. Grief transforms into protective motivation. Such patterns would be considered pathological in most species," noted the hive mind representative, whose collective consciousness struggled to comprehend individual emotional processing. "Perhaps," replied observer Marthek, "or perhaps we have been measuring emotional stability incorrectly." The leadership assessment took place in a simulated crisis scenario involving the rescue of survivors from a damaged station. Marcus was given command of a mixed-species team and told to extract maximum personnel while minimizing casualties and resource expenditure. What the evaluators witnessed over the next 4 hours fundamentally challenged their understanding of effective leadership. Rather than issuing orders based on species-specific capabilities or following established protocols, Marcus seemed to instinctively understand how to motivate each individual while coordinating their efforts toward a common goal. "He's not commanding them," observed the ethereal representative, whose gas-form consciousness allowed for detailed analysis of group dynamics. "He's enabling them. Each individual is performing beyond their normal parameters because they believe in the mission, rather than fearing the consequences of failure. Human leadership appears to be based on inspiration rather than dominance," noted Zindal. "This explains the unusual loyalty patterns observed in mixed-species crews under human command." The ethical framework evaluation proved perhaps most illuminating of all. Presented with scenarios that forced choices between competing moral imperatives, Marcus demonstrated what the evaluators termed contextual ethics, a moral framework that prioritized outcomes over absolute principles while maintaining core values under all circumstances. "Your species appears to lack fixed ethical programming," Krexthar observed with something that might have been concern. "How do you maintain social cohesion without absolute moral frameworks?" "We argue," Marcus replied simply. "We debate, we disagree, we compromise, and we try to do better next time. Perfect consistency isn't as important as perfect effort." The final test, species integration potential, took the form of a diplomatic simulation involving first contact with a previously unknown civilization. Marcus was tasked with establishing peaceful relations while protecting the interests of all galactic species. His approach was unlike anything the evaluators had seen before. Rather than following established protocols or attempting to impose galactic standards, Marcus seemed to genuinely attempt to understand the new species on their own terms, while finding common ground for cooperation. Remarkable, breathed the temporal engineer, as he observed potential future timelines branching from Marcus's choices. The probability matrices for successful integration increase exponentially under human mediation protocols. When the final evaluation concluded 47 hours after it began, Marcus found himself standing before the assembled representatives, feeling exhausted but oddly satisfied. He had given everything he had to each challenge, regardless of the outcome. Human Marcus Chen, War Master Krexthar's voice carried a weight of formal pronouncement. The Hegemony Evaluation Council has reached its conclusions regarding your species integration status. Marcus straightened, knowing that the next words would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity is not the strongest species in the galaxy, the Draconian continued. You are not the fastest, the smartest, the longest-lived, or the most technologically advanced. Marcus felt his heart sinking, but maintained his composure. However, Krexthar continued, you are the most adaptable. Your species demonstrates capabilities that cannot be measured by conventional standards, because they emerge from your unique approach to existence itself. You do not excel through specialization but through integration. You do not dominate through superiority but through cooperation. Supreme Evaluator Zindal stepped forward, her crystalline form now pulsing with what appeared to be excitement. The Council's recommendation is immediate elevation to Tier 1 status within the Galactic Trade Union, with full diplomatic recognition and expanded territorial rights. Furthermore, added Observer Marthek, humanity will be designated as the official mediation species for intergalactic conflicts and first contact protocols. Your unique capabilities make you invaluable for maintaining galactic stability. As the implications of their decisions sank in, Marcus felt a mixture of pride and responsibility that threatened to overwhelm him. Humanity hadn't just passed the evaluation. They had redefined what it meant to be successful in galactic society. Captain Blackridge's voice crackled through the station's communication system moments later. Attention all personnel. I am pleased to announce that humanity has been granted full galactic citizenship with expanded rights and responsibilities. The evaluation team has designated Kepler Station as the new center for interspecies cooperation and diplomatic training. Later, as the evaluation team prepared to depart, War Master Krexthar approached Marcus privately in the station's observation deck. Human Marcus Chen, the massive Draconian said quietly, you have changed how the galaxy sees your species forever. That is no small responsibility. I know, Marcus replied, watching stars wheel slowly beyond the reinforced windows. But humans have always been good at taking responsibility for things bigger than ourselves. Indeed, Krexthar's expression might have been amusement. We shall observe your species' development with great interest. The galaxy has become a more interesting place. As the evaluation ship departed, Marcus returned to his duties as mining foreman. But he knew that everything had changed. Word would spread throughout the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. Not because of superior strength or technology, but because of something far more valuable. The ability to adapt, to inspire, and to find solutions where others saw only problems. Zarathek found him later that shift, approaching with Vex at her side. The Salhari's manner had changed completely since their first confrontation, replaced by what appeared to be genuine respect. Foreman Chen, she said formally, I believe I owe you an apology. And perhaps a request for training in human problem-solving techniques. Marcus smiled, scratching Vex behind his earplates as the massive creature purred contentedly. No apology necessary, Supervisor. And as for training, I think we've all got a lot to learn from each other. As shift change approached, Marcus looked around at the diverse crew that had become his extended family over the past months. Beings from a dozen different worlds, working together toward common goals despite their differences. In many ways, it was everything humanity had hoped to find among the stars. Not dominance, but partnership. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and now humanity had earned their place as full participants in the greatest adventure in the history of sentient life. It was, Marcus reflected, exactly what humans did best. Rising to meet challenges that seemed impossible until someone proved they weren't. The stars waited, infinite and welcoming, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of.